Hi, this is Annie Grace, and welcome to the Snake in Mind podcast. So this is super cool because you may recognize my guest, Laura McKowen. And Laura and I had the opportunity to do a podcast, what was it, like a year and a half ago or something?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it was one of, one of the first times I've ever had somebody back. And that just goes to show you like how highly I think of Laura and her story. And Laura, we're back to not only talk, because I'd love people to get to know you a bit who haven't tuned in, but also to talk about this. Oh my gosh. It's like, oh, you guys, I have to tell you, holy crap. Like this book that is coming out, it will be out by the time this podcast is out. And it's We Are the Luckiest, The Surprising Magic of a Sober Life, is probably literally one of my favorite books in this genre that I've ever written. The writing is incredible. The storytelling, it's like riveting. It is.
Thank you so much.
Like you've really upped the bar. It's phenomenal. So anyway, I can't wait to talk about it.
I feel all weepy already. You cried on our last podcast, so maybe it's my turn this time.
I know, I got all emotional. So if you haven't watched that one, go back and catch up to where we were a year and a half ago. It's always fun to see how things evolve.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'd love for you to just, tell your story again, because I know that some people don't know you yet. And so I'd love to know you.
Yeah. So I've been sober for over 5 years now. My story is a lot like a lot of people's story, and also unique. I mean, I started drinking pretty young. I came from a family of people who drank just regularly, and it was just a very normalized thing. I in hindsight can say that I drank problematically from the beginning of when I drank, and I can feel that, I can remember the way it felt to me. And then I had this kind of nagging sense of that I liked it a little too much and I needed it a little too much, but it also looked pretty normal. I drank towards the end of high school and then through college, and I went to a big party school, and I drank a lot when I started working in the professional world, actually even more. And I thought that was like the greatest thing. It's like, oh my God, people, this is like college, but better, because we're making money and we don't have to go to class. And, it all felt very, exciting and adult and important. And I always say there was like two sort of places in my drinking where it really spiked. And one was right after I got married, because I had this sense that, like, I had this feeling of being trapped, and there's a whole story behind that. But it was like, I can say in hindsight now that I've done so much work that I was not really, I don't know if anyone's emotionally ready to get married, but I really struggled with like the intimacy part of it. And I drank to sort of counteract all of my discomfort, but especially when it came to relationships, right? And so my drinking sort of spiked up then, and then it spiked up again when I had my daughter.
Yeah, I can just to chime in, like, so relate to both of those things. I felt like I so vividly remember being like, okay, like kind of giving the signals that we're gonna have sex or something, and be like, all right, let me just run to the kitchen, down a glass of wine.
Right. Check out a little bit so I can withstand the discomfort of what a
right, which is so funny, because once you work through all the issues, you're like, oh well, sex is actually great. It was just all this baggage I was carrying along that so interesting.
Yeah, it is really interesting. But I think that's the case for a lot of people. The relationship thing is where we're most vulnerable and most uncomfortable, and alcohol is so normalized and so easy, and everyone, I always dated people who drank, and my husband and I drank together, and it wasn't even quote unquote bad, like the way we drank together per se, but it was ever present. And when I had my daughter, it spiked up again. And I hear that from a lot of women. I think there's I'm sorry. I think there's the practical, like, your body changes, your body chemistry changes, your hormones change. So it just affects you differently. And you're also sleep deprived and all those things. So but I really remember thinking and feeling like, oh my God, it's not working anymore. Like alcohol just isn't working anymore the way it used to. So I kind of drank more to try to make it work, but it just made me more anxious. I think that I really noticed the connection between anxiety and my drinking after I had my daughter. Because you can't just sleep through the day and you can't just screw around anymore. And so it definitely changed. And so when my daughter was 4 years old, well, first of all, I separated from my husband in 2012 when she was about 3. And my drinking got really bad then because I didn't have a babysitter anymore.
And was he kind of like, come on, Laura, let's, like, because my husband was always like, let's just take a day off. And I'd be like all pissy about it.
Yeah, there were many, it was a real issue in our relationship, and it wasn't, like the reason why we didn't make it, but it definitely made everything worse. And I was anyone who's really caught in addiction is unable to be in a relationship. You're in a relationship with the addiction, not that person. And I was lying, and I was lying is the key thing. Like, you're not even having an honest relationship, and so yes, he was often like, maybe take it easy. It would range from, can you just take it easy, to stop fucking drinking, like stop. And I wasn't having any of that, So I thought, when I was relieved when we finally separated, for many reasons, but primarily, honestly, because I was like, now I can drink the way I want to drink. And you're not going to be there to tell me, to judge me. Yep. So that in that year between 2012 and 2013, it got really bad. And then and then I got a DUI in early 2013. Like, the wheels really started coming off. And in July of 2013, this is kind of how the book opens, I had this horrible incident with my daughter where I left her in a hotel room overnight at my brother's wedding because I was blackout drunk. And that really started me onto the sobriety path, because it was public, like my family was there, and it was, people were, they weren't going to drink with me anymore. They weren't going to, until then, I had somehow been able to explain everything away and just kind of brush stuff under the rug, and no one really knew how bad it was. But that was like this, okay, now we see how bad, and I saw how bad it was. That was horrific. And so I went to my first meeting shortly after that because I didn't know what else to do. And it took me another year of a lot of starts and stops and a lot of pain and a lot of, I call it purgatory. It was like one foot in sobriety, one foot in, my old life. And I really didn't want to get sober. I really, really, really begged for something else to be available to me. But by September of 2014, I finally stopped. And, there's obviously a lot of story in there in that year, especially, of just profound struggle with letting it go and what that meant for my life, because it's not, of course, about the drinking, just the drinking. A lot of what you talk about is like, it's interwoven into everything that we do, and especially our belief system about what makes a good life and a fun life and a meaningful life and exciting life. And it was a huge, huge grief process for me. But I did, finally in September, and then everything since then, it's beautiful and brutal journey. I've changed careers. I can't even believe what's happened in the course of 5 years. So that's the very abbreviated version. I don't know if you want more than that.
No, that's great. It gives us like a good launching pad. I feel like one of the things that's so interesting is like it felt like at the wedding and stuff, it was like, yes, I need to do this, but I guess, but all your family like knowing, okay, well, this is the cat's out of the bag, so to speak, and so
Yeah.
this has to be something that is done, but it was never like you were just sort of convinced, like there was, like what you say is like there's got to be a third way, like there has to be another option here, you know.
Yeah, I call it the third door. I was just like disbelieving that the two options were to keep going as I was, which I knew I couldn't, right? Though I tried to hang on as long as I could, or get sober. I was like, that's just, it was like, it was bargaining. I mean, it was just
So I
bargaining.
guess
Like,
my question is, like, now that you know what it feels like to live the life you're living now, um, because I think that, okay, so I don't know if this is going to make sense at all. This is just something that's like
go
budding in
for it.
my head. All right.
Yeah.
So like here's how you were before. This is the train that we're on. I love the train, by the way. I use the train, and I had a train situation in my own story. So that was amazing. I just have to read her train chapter. So good.
Yeah, yeah.
But so this is a train we're on, and we see where it's headed, and we're like, oh crap, well, we have to get off this train. But then we have this idea of sobriety, right? And
Yeah.
then so you're looking for this third door, and it kind of almost strikes me that like in some ways by going through the door of sobriety, you actually find the third way because it's nothing like you thought it was going to be.
Yeah, that's pretty brilliant and true. Yes, it's not at all like I thought it was going to be at
Which is
all.
the coolest.
It is, but it's like you got to go through it to get there, you know, and that going through a part is really difficult. I mean, it was for me.
Yeah, there's
Other people.
um the book Fear, and I can never pronounce his name, Thich Nhat Hanh.
Thich Nhat Hanh.
Thank you.
Techno Han.
Anyway, it's like the premise of this book is like take yourself down to the ash so that you can live fully, right? And it's not that you eradicate fear, you make it go away, but if you intentionally feel it, feel the most intense fear, feel the fear of losing your children or your life or your loved ones or your dog or whatever it is, all the fear that you've been burying, and like take it all the way down to the ground, then actually your life becomes so much richer. And I feel like that's a lot like this journey. I was reading a book called, I forget, it's about this concept called the winning strategy. And it's the same thing. It's like, we're so clinging to how things have been. But if you take it, she takes it all the way. It's such a brutal chapter. She literally takes it all the way to every single human being is going to die with regret and with happiness and regret. And you're like, there's not even a chance they're going to reach a place where you're like, and it's done, and now I can die. Like, you will always die feeling like you wish you would have done something differently. You'll have some level of disappointment. You'll have some level of regret. And she like drives this point home because she's like, if you know that, then just like let it all go and like just start living, you know? And it's so interesting.
Yeah, it is so interesting. And it's like, you know, we can read about these things and hear about these things and learn about these things. And I was like I am a lifetime seeker. I was always drawn to this type of messaging and philosophy. But until you have your face pressed up against that wall and you have to actually, oh my gosh, you have to actually do that. My sponsor says it's experiential only. You know, you have to experience it. And when you walk up to the edge of that cliff, you have to jump off, you know, and so that you do burn to ash. I mean, if you can boil sobriety down to, there's many things, but I would say one of the key things is, standing in the fire of whatever it is you're feeling and letting it wash through you. I mean, we as humans really from day one kind of construct our lives to not feel things that are uncomfortable, and sobriety forces you up against those edges. And what I have learned and seen and experienced is that in those places where I have actually felt most held. It's like when it's empty, when there is truly nothing. You know, the wisdom of no escape is what Pema Chodron calls it. There's wisdom there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so I feel like that's what sobriety has been. It's just like you're continually peeling back these safeguards that you've tried to create to protect yourself from a direct experience of life, which is crazy because the direct experience for me is what I was looking for. It's
Right.
like, that's what I wanted, but I would have never thought it was going to happen through sobriety.
Right. Because like, I totally agree with that. Like my story was a little different than yours in that I didn't start drinking at a very early age, but I do remember feeling like, oh, this experience, whatever's happening right now, whether it's we're all on the beach in Cape Cod, right? This is going to be better if we all go get a bunch of wine and then are on the beach in Cape Cod. Like it's enhancing the experience.
Totally.
And so I felt like that with so many things, but now it's so interesting because like I look back on my drinking memories and I can see so clearly now that you almost have this, like if you imagine life as like these ups and downs and these peaks and valleys and all this experience, right? And it's all beautiful. And then you pour alcohol onto all of those situations. It levels it. It's a lot like I felt on antidepressants once. I was on antidepressants for almost 17 years, but once I finally started to get healthy, and by the way, I had to stop drinking to do that, I started to notice that I wasn't feeling, I remember watching a television commercial and it was something that would have made me cry. And I was like, I feel nothing. Wait a second. I actually want to feel sad in this situation, right? Like the proper human response to seeing like, we saw a deer with a broken leg the other day out in our neighborhood. And it was super sad. And like, we cried and like, that's the proper human response. That's what actually makes us feel better in this weird way. And so this idea that like, we want to, we think it's enhancing all the human responses, but really it's just taking them down to this very basic level that is nowhere near kind of the breadth and beauty and brutality, as you say, that real life can be. And
totally. Yes. And I think people that's sort of what I say in the final chapter is like, I just can't believe I thought that I was actually living because, one of my friends like always would joke that she would say, you have a very bright rainbow. Like I, feel all my things big. But when I was really drinking, I just felt a few things a lot. I felt maybe some excitement, a lot of anxiety, a lot of shame. But everything else was like trapped behind this gauzy sort of numbness. Like even my love for my daughter, it was like, I know it's there, but I can't feel it.
Yeah.
And that's terrible. It's a really haunting thing to not be able to access that. And joy, I had no concept of what it actually felt like. I mean, I didn't even grieve my divorce until like well into sobriety. And I thought that I was just resilient, I just bounced back. And it's like, no, you just kept numbing it and stuffing it. And none of us gets away with any of that. We know that, right? Like it doesn't just go away. It never just goes away. So it's going to come out somehow. But yeah, I just can't believe, I so agree with that. And I think it's so fascinating that we try so hard not to feel. Because to me, there's like, even grief is this beautiful thing. Like right alongside grief, there's this joy. And, shame is awful to feel. But that's all I ever felt. And I felt like I had no choice. Like I couldn't get out in front of that because I was constantly doing things to be shameful for. So it's this really strange emotional predicament for sure.
And just like you say, and what I'm learning, we're totally going like the next level in this conversation. I love it. But what I've really been learning, I'd say in the last probably 12 to 18 months is that like and you touch on it so beautifully in your book, is like everything truly is a paradox, right? Like everything really is a tension. And I think it's so humanly natural to bounce from one to the other and then make the other wrong, right? So it was so humanly natural for me to stop drinking and demonize everything about alcohol and the mommy drinking culture and everything.
And people drink and drink and
soapbox, you know, and then like moving back and like, but everything is really that tension. And what you say about shame, it is so, I mean, anybody, we can instantly think of something that we've done and we just feel like, oh, you know, but actually, like one of the most beautiful feelings is loving yourself and having grace for yourself out of that shame, or allowing somebody else to, by the way. So allowing yourself to be forgiven or to have that grace. And like that feeling, I think, in my opinion, of for me, witnessing undeserved grace, whether it's, I don't know, Les Miserables, right? Like the scene, Javert, like witnessing undeserved grace is like nothing will bring me kind of emotionally to my knees faster. But we wouldn't have that level of beauty in humanity if we didn't make mistakes.
Oh, then that's a whole other level of conversation. Yes. That's why I think people who are in recovery tend to be, or have the capacity to be, so much more compassionate, because you've been in hell. Like, you know, I don't know if you read the Magnificent Monsters chapter, but that's basically what I say. Like, we are all good and bad, but only some of us know that. You know, I don't go around wondering if people are bad or good anymore. I just know they're both, and that I have the capacity for everything too. And what a different way to live that is. And look, I'm not without judgment. I'm judgmental all the time, but I have a place to return to, you know, where it's like, oh, I can see that in me. I can see the liar in me. I can see the cheater in me. I can see you can see everything, you know.
Have you done any any work or on spiral dynamics?
I know I'm very familiar with it, but I haven't done any work on it. How do you do work? Yeah, I'm familiar with it.
I guess I was looking for the right word. I was like, work isn't the right word.
No, yeah.
Just the understanding. So like the basic concept, how I understand it is that we're certainly like evolving upwards, and we are doing this as a society, and you can see that the things that we're fighting about today politically are so much more evolved than the things we were fighting about 50 years ago or 100 years ago, and it's so beautiful. And like you can see in our children, like the level of compassion and understanding and awareness that my kids have for other kids versus how we were when we were kids is incredible. And you can see it in my parents' generation, like it's all coming. And so it's this evolution that's really beautiful. And part of it is just like different levels of like awareness of something beyond like, you know, ego. So you start at the basic thing, and it's just like an infant, like sort of helpless. And then you go into this power player when you're 2, and you just want to be like, you know, it's your way or the highway. And some people get stuck there. Like there's dictators that get stuck there, and they want it their way, and they're going to be pissed off if it's never else their way. And then you move up and up and up. And I will say that one of the things that can catapult you from kind of a lower level of sort of almost vibration and stuff to a higher level is the experience of addiction, because you have to come face to face you have to come face to face with your most darkest parts. And in order to survive it, you have to find a place of love and compassion for your most darkest parts. And you can't, love and compassion and grace are things that if you give more, you get more. If you create more, there is more. There's such abundance principles. They're not scarce. There's nothing like, the more love I give you, the more love there is in the world. And so once you give that, then you heal yourself, and then you have so much more of it to give to other people, which is such a beautiful thing. So we as a culture just sit here and like there's still such like shame and stigma and, oh man, poor you. But I think that's why the title of your book is like the most profound thing I've ever read, is because wait a second, we are like, it's so true. Like, and again, it might be something that you have to, especially if you're stuck right now and you're listening to this, it is experiential. You're not going to know this maybe
or feel it, and you're going to actually reject that idea, you know, like that's why I said it when I said We Are the Luckiest way back when. I was like, because I had that epiphany. I was like, oh, this is actually what I wanted the whole time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I call it limitations, you know, like we all have these invitations, and it's usually through darkness and pain, and addiction just one of them. But man, that's a good one. It is a good one,
It's the
because it
fast track.
really it really brings you to your knees. I mean, for me, it was like, um, it's a brutal path to go. But hey, it could be anything, and that's what I want to tell people too. It's like, that was just my story, that was my thing, but we all have stuff. We all have a thing, or many
Mhm.
things.
I love that we all have a thing. It's so true. And you can start to really notice it in, you know, and I mean, a lot of people that really kind of look down on, oh man, well, you drank too much, like, you know, I'm like, you can see, well, I'm really happy that it was alcohol, because guess what? If it was like I see in your life and it was work, there's no
Mm-hmm.
real true rock bottom there. I mean, yeah, maybe somebody can ultimately, like, your family can leave you, but you find people, you know,
To
if the thing you're
support your,
stepping into doesn't have such a high cost, it's going to be very hard to see that it's costing you anything. And you are so much less aware of your thing, right? And
it's
so,
so true.
yeah.
Working, and yeah, I've talked about that a lot with people recently. It seems just that there's, because a drug and alcohol addiction has such an ugly manifestation, not just, you know, ugly, it's painful, it's dangerous, and, you know, and can lead to death often. Then yeah, it's, you can't really turn your eye from that. But I mean, work is applauded, and so many other things are like, we love that, you know, or at least it's socially acceptable.
Yeah. And but the cost, I mean, is still really high. And I
Yeah.
actually, Dawn, Dawn's story
Nickel.
from She Recovered, Dawn Nickel,
Yeah.
yeah, we did a podcast on workaholism, and it was so
Mm-hmm.
powerful, because I was like, wow, the cost is really high still with that. And I find myself falling into that. I mean, who doesn't, especially when you're doing something that you feel so passionate about? It's like, you know,
Yeah.
so easy to do.
Feels so right. Feels so
Yeah.
important.
Yes. Right. It's
Yep.
so funny and so true. Funny because it's true. So one of the things that you talk about that you taught me a lesson, and I think you know this, but if not, I'm going to say it anyway. But I remember very early days when I had written my book, and I didn't have I went to one AA meeting right before it was published, because I just felt like I needed to have the experience
Mm-hmm.
in order to make sure that I'd read the big book and stuff like that, just as research. And
Yeah.
and I went to this one meeting, and it was a really beautiful experience. You know, really heartbreaking, but really beautiful all at
Mm-hmm.
once. And so then I published the book, and you and I got in touch very early on. And so
Mm-hmm.
I was coming out of this really dark place, because I had published, and I had things happen that, I mean, I haven't really told a lot of people about, because I didn't want people to like feel bad for me, and people get really like defensive for me, and I didn't want that either. But I had
Yes.
a band of like 8 quote experts come together to try to, you know, corner me into a video call to tell me that I needed to not publish the book, because it was going to kill people, because the book was
Okay.
out unpublished first. So it was out as a
Yep.
PDF for like almost a year before.
Right. Like, you're going to kill people because you're not acknowledging alcoholism.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And so I was coming from this very wounded place where I was on, you know, the daily getting emails about how
Yeah.
shame on me, who did I think I was, this like just really toxic stuff that really took me, because I was reading every single one of my emails and
Of
Facebook comments at
course.
the time. It took me way down. And so I was very trying hard not to be defensive, but I was very like hurting from it all. And I didn't have any experience. And you told me something that really changed everything for me. And what it was is like, and we were talking about, because in my book I take issue with the word alcoholic, right?
Yeah.
As a concept, I think it's
Yep.
doing more harm in society than good. And you said, well, why do you think people would use that word? And I was like, I can't even, I don't know. I got nothing. And
Can't
and
fathom.
you're like, here's why, is because when you are caught up in something that looks like this, looks like literally the cycle of drinking until you puke, passing out, waking up, and drinking till you puke again. And you literally feel like you are tortured to the point where you can't physically stop yourself putting it in your body as long as it's present in your presence. And then you go through this massive withdrawal and massive detox, and you finally come to a place where you can say, I'm an alcoholic, and that frees you, because your fear of drinking again as an alcoholic, suddenly something clicks into place. And suddenly you have this like, okay, because I'm an alcoholic, I can never again drink in safety.
Right.
And you said, Annie, everything that is coming at you that's so intense is totally from a place of fear. And I was like, oh my gosh, you are so right. And then everything that I felt that was like defensive could turn so quickly to compassion. And I was like, oh, and it was just such a gift. And it's like, I still feel and know that. So first of all,
I totally remember that conversation. Yeah, because you are saying the thing that this belief system that is, you believe has saved your life, you're saying it doesn't exist, or that it's unnecessary, right? And by the way, I mean, I don't call myself an alcoholic. Even though I've gone to meetings, I don't go to meetings anymore, but I still love the 12 steps, and I have a sponsor, and I have this sort of complicated relationship with AA, but I don't like the word either. I don't use it because I feel it's very punitive. But I do believe, I know, it's not because I don't think I have an alcohol problem. It's not because I think I can drink, or I don't think acute addiction exists to alcohol, but I just don't like the terminology. So I get it. I understand. And even more so now, 5 years later and into it. I think it speaks to your point of these hardened edges that we have in the beginning of any big change, because we have to, it's like, you have to have this thing, you have to build something that has weight and it can sustain you. And oftentimes it's like, you have to have this rigid belief system so that you can sustain this path that you're going down. And then over time, there's more flexibility and pliability to allow for softness. And
it's so amazing, because if you look at spiral dynamics, like if you look at this evolution through these phases of consciousness, like that's exactly it. Like the blue phase is all about you evolve into being rules and black and white, and you do that in order to further the whole thing, right?
And then I think it's, you get to purple, you're
like, why do you need rules? But like, no, we all had to go through that. We all had to do that. I feel like I did that with my faith very, very early on. I found faith at like 19, and I was like, gonna go convert everybody.
Yeah, totally.
And I feel like I did that with alcohol too, because I found, the truth about alcohol for me and all this science. And I was like, gonna go tell everybody, and I really repelled people. And it wasn't until I kind of evolved beyond that level that, it was like that people were more receptive to me. But I think it's such a necessary stepping stone. And that's one of the things that I love about this kind of framework is it is all a necessary stepping stone. Like we have to pass through all of these. You can't.
It's all part of the path. It's not a mistake. Right. No. And thank God you didn't sort of know to be afraid of that, because you never would have written your book.
I would have never written it.
Right. And it's such a hugely, I hear people literally every day, whether it's on Instagram or emails or, they mention you and your work, and it's how a lot of people start to think about stopping drinking. Thank God you didn't know about that. Thank God I didn't know about the things I should have been afraid of talking about, or I wouldn't have, knew, especially when you're talking about something as, big as addiction to people, that's is close to their life or their vitality, their aliveness. As that is, an alternate opinion is never going to be popular. People need to hear that. Like the people who change, or the changers in the world, they're never popular. And
they don't often come, somebody told me this recently, I guess there's a book written on it, but they don't often come from within the fabric of the existing either.
No, almost never. Right.
So like the advances in physics don't usually actually come from physicists,
right.
Like it's just interesting.
They're too inside. Yeah. Yeah. And it's, what I try to stress is like, it's okay for things to be complicated. It's okay for you to Like, I still think the 12 steps are beautiful and important and ancient spiritual wisdom. And I see a lot of people get better by going through them. But there's all kinds of stuff about AA that I totally reject, and that's okay, right? It's okay to be in different phases at different points too. I think in the case of AA versus not AA, especially, people feel like they have to choose a side. And it's like, no, you don't.
No, you don't.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. And I feel like I feel like I was like forced to like, okay, since they're all against me, I have to, you push, I'll push.
I have to be against too, right?
Right. And then I'm so grateful to you, because it was literally within the first year or so of the book coming out that you really, you, Laura, released me from that. And I'm so grateful, because I think it's so important for people to, right now in our world, if you want to be in real life with people on a regular basis, that's where you should go. Like, there's no doubt in this.
Yeah. It's still the biggest, like, in real life network that there is.
And we need in real life people, because there are, you could say this about any institution. You could go into a church and you could find the worst of the worst, and you could find the best of the best, because the church, guess what? It's made up of humans. You could go into
exactly
the worst of the worst and the best of the best. You could find the heroes, and you could find the people abusing their power. Like, it just is humans. And but yeah, I love moving past the all or nothing, and this has to be right or wrong, and we have to take a side, and like just moving into the just the complication, and allowing for that, just saying, I don't know all the answers, and that's gonna have to be okay.
Yes. Yeah, totally
I
agree.
how you talked in the chapter, and I loved, I love so much about your book, but like when you were like, I've rewritten this, like I've literally written 10,000 words to write this chapter. And then, and you tell your truth about your journey and the complicated nature of it. And then you tell this beautiful story about some people who, would you tell that story? It's just so good.
Sure. It's like, I already have tear. It's so, the bottom line of what I say in the chapter about AA is like, look, there are so many things that I didn't like about it, don't like about it, but those people saved my life. They really did. And for that reason, I'm always beholden to it, will always be beholden to it and them. Not out of duty, but just out of like reverence, So the story is, I one weekend decided that I would get drunk and get in the car with my daughter and go to an AA party. And I still remember people afterwards going, "Why? What were you thinking?" And it's like, nothing. Like, you can't explain anything that people do when they're drinking, especially at that stage. So I showed up, and all the wild things that people do in drinking and even in sobriety in AA, it's not still pretty like not kosher to go to an AA party wasted. That's not a usual occurrence, especially with my daughter. So I'm laughing because it's just like, I shake my head. But they, obviously caught on pretty quickly, and all that happened is a few people who knew me well took me outside. They were like, "Girl, we're gonna get you home." And a woman elected herself to drive me and Alma the 45 minutes up to my house and back. And she was just so kind to me and never said a damn word about any of it being shitty or wrong, or judgmental or anything. It was just like pure grace and, like you said, undeserved favor. It was just it was life-changing for me, because that next day, was pretty dark. It's like, I'd been through a lot of ugly stuff because of my drinking, but that really, I was so ashamed, and I kind of just figured, I'm just going to forever tuck this one under the rug and never talk to any of those people again. But like, I needed them. It was all I had. I didn't have a network otherwise of sober people. And So there was that night, and then there was the people, you know, the people who just right the next day were like, hey, how you doing? You okay? Like, what's going on? Like the next day, you know, after that embarrassing thing had happened. And I just think about, you know, that the thing I say too is like that no one was doing that because they're like these altruistic angels. They just learned that because someone had probably done something similar for them. And I've since done things like that for people, you know? So to me, that's like just the core of service and fellowship, you know, like we're all on this crazy ass ride together and we're going to take you home and no one's going to say anything except kind words to you. And we're going to call you tomorrow.
Yeah, it's so cool. And just so like, what a powerful thing, because now you can tell that story. Now you can show that level of grace that exists in the world and that level of just like undeserved favor. And by the way, you can pay it forward. And like none of that could happen without your mistake.
Right. My like horrifically embarrassing mistake, you know, it's just, yeah, none of that could happen without my mistake. I mean, I tell the story of the prodigal son in the book too, and that sort of like encapsulates what I think you're trying to say and what I'm trying to say, which is like, we're never playing the game that we think we're playing, which is the good versus bad game. Like if I'm just good enough, I will get what I'm supposed to get. It's like, no, the game is never to try to be good. You know, the line from that story in the Bible, which I'm not even a big Bible person, but I love that story, is you are always with me and everything I have is yours. And to me, it's like to hear that as someone who so extraordinarily fucked up their life, you know, and made so many really painful, brutal mistakes, of which I thought I could never come back from, to hear that you are always with me, meaning like you get all the love in the world just because you exist, and everything I have is yours, is that's a pretty important message.
And it's like, it just comes to mind that it is the most pain and the most dark that transmutes into the most love and the most grace, right? Always. And I remember really, you know, reading that story and in my early 20s and just being so struck by it and having it. And I remember, not feeling sorry is the wrong word, but I remember people who couldn't relate to that story or who felt like it wasn't fair. And there's another one, I forget what it was, but it's like about the wages. Like somebody gets paid the same amount for working just a few hours than somebody who's been there all day. And the people who are there all day feel like it's so unfair. And I remember having a really close friendship, one of my best friends since kind of preschool. And after like I went through, like I made every wrong decision you could have made. I moved out of my house at 15. I moved in with a man who was completely violent for 4 years. Like there was like this whole long story of all these mistakes. And she walked a path of being, you know, homecoming queen and getting straight A's and going to the best college. And I remember in our 30s, she came and she was just like, I just don't get it. Like, I'm just like, I can't understand.
I've been so good. And
I've been so good. And now you are this success and I am doing what I'm doing. And it was a point that ultimately, like, unfortunately, sort of really undermined our friendship and we're not really close anymore. But I remember feeling like, wow, like it's so hard. It's so hard to know the beauty of grace and undeserved favor if you haven't really fucked up.
Yes. Well, you can't.
You can't. And it's such a gift to know that. Like, there's no better gift to know that, like, you are always with me and I am, everything I have is yours. Like, to know that you are worthy just because you exist. And you can't know you're worthy just because you exist unless you've gone to the bottom of the worst and found that you're still alive. You still have the gift of breathing. You still exist, you know, and like that, I don't know. I guess this whole conversation is just like so confirming this beautiful book, which everybody needs to read it immediately. Oh my gosh, because like you just, Laura, you've just like captured this truth through your stories. And I know on the back, like Glennon says, it's like the most generous. And that word struck me because I was like, before I read it, I read the back and I was like, what does that mean? Generous. And then I started reading it and I got it. It's generous because you give all of yourself in this book. Like you literally, you don't hold anything back. You don't try to be anything that you're not. You don't try to sway anybody's opinion to anything. You just tell the truth, and you're so vulnerable and real. And it is like truly a generous book. It's just so beautiful.
Thank you. You've made me cry now.
Sorry. We always do this to each other. I don't normally cry on podcasts. Once with you. It's ridiculous.
Oh my God. Oh, thank you for that. Really.
Blowing my nose. Sorry, people.
No, thank you for that. Truly, it's means a lot.
But it's just awesome. And I have to admit, when I first saw it years ago, you would have the "We Are the Luckiest" shirts. I don't think I got it at that point in my life. Like I don't think I got it yet. I was like,
yeah. Well, it can sound a little trite and sunshiny, and that's not really at all how I am. So maybe that's why I'm okay saying it, because it comes from a much deeper place than that.
Yeah, it felt like I don't even know what it felt like, but I was like, are we trying to convince ourselves of something?
Yeah, right.
But
yeah,
I'm very happy that you have shown me the truth of that statement, because I consider you one of my, like I said, with the whole AA conversation, and then through this book, like you're a very important teacher for me, Laura. And so I just really appreciate you
so much. Likewise.
Awesome. Okay, well, where can we find,
now that we've cried,
your book? Where can people find you?
I think that's the end now. Everything is on my website. It's lauramckowen.com. It's just my name. My book is everywhere that books are sold. And I so appreciate you having me on a second time. I feel so special.
So good. Such a wonderful conversation. All right. Bye.
Bye.
Let me ask you a question. What is better than change? Lasting change, of course. And if you've had trouble making change stick, either with alcohol or in any other area of your life, you are in for a treat. I created the 100 Days of Lasting Change to ensure that we don't just change for a moment, but we truly transform for a lifetime. And this program is so close to my heart. Thousands of people have been through it and their results are incredible. But don't take my word for it. Check it out at thisnakedmind.com/100 days. And as always, rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast, as it truly helps the message reach somebody who might need to hear it today.